You can't say Donald Trump must be elected today and the following day he makes executive orders, and then you come here and blame the South African government as if the South African government did not do anything in between. That was a predetermined outcome where he wanted to come into office and punish South Africa for its position on Palestine and many other issues. We must be very clear that we are not going to agree to any form of bullying by anyone.
Hello brothers and sisters, I really hope you're all doing fine now. This is the time that we've been talking about, the time to consider the motherland as a sovereign continent. This continent has suffered a lot. Exploitation of mineral resources. Its children were taken away into slavery. Oppression still continues. Police brutality still continues. So there is need for us to talk about this, and there is need for us to acknowledge the development that Pan-Africanists are doing in Africa. So let's watch this video, then have a real quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
It's a lie that there is farm killings in South Africa. Actually, those who are married in farms and owning farms, they kill each other for money, for policy monies. The farmers themselves kill each other for greedy reasons. The farm workers kill the farmers because they rape them in exchange for money and do not pay them, like Eugene Terreblanche did when he raped a farm worker and did not want to pay. We cannot be told that there are farm murders in South Africa when the farmers themselves are actually killing the farm workers. It was a white farmers who killed two women in Polokwane and fed them to the pigs. It's a complete lie that white people are being killed in South Africa. If anything, white people live in privilege, and that's what Donald Trump knows. You cannot say Donald Trump is misinformed. They've got the best intelligence equipment in the whole world. They even have a military base next to South Africa in Botswana to listen to every conversation we have. They can tell you what is in private conversation in the executive and everywhere else. They don't need AfriForum. They are using AfriForum as a scapegoat to punish us politically. And we ought to be very clear about that. When the aid came into South Africa at the first place, it was not to help Africans. It was imperialist forces putting the aid into South Africa so that they can control South Africa and use that aid to always say to you, if you take a political stand against the imperialist forces, we'll always cut the aid. So we ought to have known even then that we're not supposed to entirely rely on the USA. I'm very happy that the Minister of Health is speaking about possible interventions that can be made to avoid that aid of America. We can do with every help, but we will never accept help that say we must allow the perpetuation of white privilege. We cannot allow the whiteness to prevail in South Africa because we want to save life. We will save life. America did not save us during apartheid. Children were murdered in 1976. Children were murdered in the 80s. Where was America against apartheid? If America had anything to save an African life, it's a lie. They never wanted to save us. They were never there for us before. Palestine was there for us. Cuba was there for us. Russia was there for us.
It is Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah who writes, and it is not only the Europeans who started that journey of disruption and exploitation. The Arabs did it, and we don't talk about it as loudly as we should. They came, and they took us into slavery, and they castrated our men, so that when you don't see dark-skinned people in the numbers that we should in the Arab world, is because they castrated men. And we must never forget that. The Portuguese came. They were in West Africa. They were in the Congo. And we welcome them as we normally do, and we still do. And no sooner had we welcomed them than they made the claim that they had discovered us. They discovered us, they claimed. They discovered our mountains which we had lived next to for ages. The French came, the Germans came, the Italians came, the Belgians came, the English came, all in their arrogance, and they made their way. And in what we now call Uganda, they came to the Bunyoro Kitara kingdom and they were resisted by Kabarega. And a man called Baker came and he was beaten by Kabarega. History teaches us. But then they went away and they assembled in Berlin in 1884 and 1885, and they divided us into what we now have as Uganda, as Tanzania, as Kenya. We are now 54 and still counting. But what we must never forget is that at all time we resisted. Those who say we never resisted are mistaken. We did. They planted the seeds of division. I can still remember those famous words of Nigeria's Chinua Achebe in his book Things Fall Apart, when he says that they came and planted the seed amongst brother and brother, sister and sister, and things fell apart, and they have remained apart. They came and they disrupted us. They told us that our God was not God. They came with a God, and today, when you go into many households of those who claim to be Christians or those who are Christians, you find the image of an actor called Geoffrey Hunter being received as the image of Jesus Christ. They came and told us that our names were not good names, and they gave us names. They came and told us that our natural features had to acquire different names. So they came and found Lake Muitanzige and say, no, it is Lake Albert. They came and found our lake with our name. They say, this is Edward. They said another one is George. The falls which we had lived with, they said, this is Murchison. And even our national park, they called it Elizabeth. And when they went down, they found Lake Narubare and said, this is Victoria. And when they went down, they said that the falls, Mosio Tunya, was Victoria Falls. They came and told us that our culture meant nothing. And we believed them. And unfortunately, we still believe them. So today, when we are gathered here to commemorate one of the great African stalwarts, Omuka Makabarega, we must ask ourselves fundamental questions, uncomfortable questions. And those questions relate and rotate around the question of the thing that is called development. What is this thing called development? I remember not so long ago, the great Tanzanian founding father, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, being interviewed about development, and he said, from where we sit, development is not confined to the size of what the Europeans call the gross domestic product, GDP. That to us is not development, he said. Development cannot, in our estimation, be per capita income. That is not development. Development must not be restricted to the number of skyscrapers that we have. No, that is not development. Development cannot be understood to mean that we must go to the moon. That is not development. Development, from what we see and what we call development, is to have an environment where there is a spiritual, social, political, and economic contentment. So let the Americans go to the moon, but we want water in our households. And I still believe that in our understanding of development, we must recognize that development is about our ability to recognize the humanity in ourselves. It is those civilizations that have claimed that they were developed that have visited great pain upon the world. The Europeans, tell me, throughout the ages, which other civilization has visited pain upon humanity like the European tribes? Whether those tribes are Germans, whether they are British, whether they are Italian, whether they are English, whether they are the Belgians, there is no civilization other than civilizations from Europe that have visited pain upon others like they have. When in 1914 the European tribes were fighting amongst themselves, they called it the World War. When they fight themselves, they call it World War. From where they sit, what they do is the world. When they fought again between 1939 and 1945, they did not call it tribal war, they call it World War. And we were inducted into those wars. They came to us and they told us that our cultures were not good, so that even today, as I speak to you, instead of addressing you in Kiswahili or Kinyoro or Luganda, they have captured our tongues that I am now speaking to you in a foreign tongue. I look forward to the day when in an assembly such as this, I'll address you in the Kiswahili language. I look forward to that day. I look forward to the day when we shall have totally liberated ourselves, that we will be able to appreciate that indeed when we talk about development, we talk about the totality of culture. In Kiswahili they say, mwachamila ni mtumwa. He or she who abandons his or her culture is a slave. And there is a sense in which we remain enslaved. How do we remain enslaved? Just look at your names, including my very own. Look at it. Who is this individual that is called Patrick, for whom I am named? Who is he? Why is it that on the day that I was baptized, they could not allow me to use my local name? Why? Why is it that when we are referring to ourselves, we refer to ourselves as Anglophone, as Francophone, as Lusophone? And right now we are even always in the business of referring to ourselves as other phones. Soon we will be Sinophone. This is what we are doing to ourselves on a daily basis in the name of development. When we run our governments and their university professors here, when they teach political science, oh, what science do they teach? They teach the ideas of somebody from the United States. They talk about Max Weber. They talk about Adam Smith. They talk about John Austin. They talk about H.A. Elart. They don't talk about Kabarega. They don't talk about Mutesa. They don't talk about Shaka the Amazulu. They don't talk about us because we are totally dominated. So that even the universities that we run, the law that we teach, the political science that we teach, the history that we teach, the geography that we teach, is so Eurocentric that on this day, when we remember Omukama Kabarega, we must also exercise the spirit of slavery, mental slavery, that we may welcome a new spirit of freedom. Because if we don't, we will be dominated throughout the ages. You know, as I talk about development now, I think about this continent that has known slavery. The Omukama himself was taken away from the comfort of his kingdom and spirited to Seychelles. He stayed there for over 2 decades. When they had neutered the society, then they allowed him to come back. He did not get home. He died on his way. But this country for a long time did not even recognize him until later in the day. But we still recognize Prince Charles with a name in the middle of Kampala. I look forward to the day when such names shall no longer exist in the streets of Kampala. When I think about this continent, and I think about how we were colonized, and I think about how we regained our independence, and no sooner had we regained our independence than we adopted the very same things that we inherited from the white colonizers. So that if you go to the Ugandan parliament, the Kenyan parliament, the Ghanaian parliament, the Zimbabwean parliament, the Nigerian parliament, as the great African-American John Henrik said, they are mimicry of what the colonizers left for us. And he says, and I agree, we will never succeed on the basis of that kind of organization. We were told, and we are still told, that in order to run a government, in order to run a judiciary, you must run it in the manner that the British taught us to do, complete with the manner in which they dressed. In order to run a parliament, we must run a parliament like they did, and our speaker must still wear some woolen white thing, which people stopped wearing many years ago, but we still wear. And even when we run our affairs, we must do it in the manner that they did. We are mimicking them. And when we think we have developed, indeed we are not. That is what colonization did to us. So today, when we are gathered here to remember Omukama Kabarega, we are asking ourselves, is there not something in our tradition that we could use to change the continent of Africa? And why is that argument legitimate and necessary? It is legitimate and necessary because when Ghana became the first country to regain her independence, the first sub-Saharan country to regain her independence, always be very careful, because the Sudanese will tell you that they regained their independence in 1956 and Ghana in 1957, but I always remind them that the real independence in Africa was with Ghana in 1957. And I can still remember those powerful words of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah on 6th of March 1957 say that the independence of Ghana meant nothing if the rest of Africa was not free. But even as he spoke those words, Kwame Nkrumah was quite clear. He was clear that flag independence, the mere fact that we have the Ugandan flag, or the Kenyan flag, or the Ugandan national anthem, or the Kenyan national anthem, or the Ghanaian national anthem, or the Nigerian national anthem, was not sufficient. that there was something else. And he reminded us in 1965 that Africa was getting into the most dangerous stage, the stage where the former colonizers would become more deadly through the neo-colonial project. No sooner had he written his book than they overthrew him. No sooner had he written his book than they started destroying what we had inherited from them. So those of you who are students of history will remember the 1960s. You will remember in 1961, the Congolese thought that they had regained independence under Patrice Emery Lumumba. They killed him after 9 months. The Togolese thought that they had regained independence under Sylvanus Olympio. They killed him in 1963. The Ghanaians thought that they had regained independence in 1957. They overthrew Nkrumah in 1966. They thought in Nigeria that they had regained independence with Nnamdi Azikiwe and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. They overthrew him in 1967. The Malians thought that they had regained independence through Modibo Keita. They overthrew him in 1968. The Algerians thought they did so through Ahmed Ben Bella. They overthrew him in 1968. Africa, as I speak now, and I want you to cast your eyes across the continent of Africa and see the crisis of governance, and therefore begging the question, is there a place for African culture in governance? Tell me whether there is peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tell me whether there is peace in Sudan. Tell me whether there is peace in northern Mali. Tell me whether there is peace in Somalia. Tell me whether there is peace in Cameroon. Tell me whether the Europeans are not telling us what to do. Tell me whether they do not send their agents across every country. Tell me whether the IMF and the World Bank are not trying to interfere in our affairs. Tell me whether they are not telling us who a man is and who a woman is. Tell me whether they are not telling us what to wear. Tell me, what are they not telling us? They are telling us that if we don't have culture, they'll give us their culture. Tell me. This is the state in which we find ourselves. And therefore, today, when we are assembled here to remember Omukama Kabarega, and we ask ourselves whether there is a place for culture in development, we owe ourselves a duty to define what culture is. You know, European anthropologists, they are the notorious ones. They tell us that when you talk about African culture, they have no culture. They could not write. Not true. When the Europeans were living in caves, we already had the Benin Empire, longer than the Chinese walls. We already had the Monomotapa Empire. We already had the walls of Timbuktu. Before the Europeans knew whether it is the earth that went round the sun, the Dogon already knew astronomy as it is known today. They knew. When they could not write, the Africans had already identified the value of zero in mathematics. When they did not know about cesarean section, operations of that nature already taking place in the continent of Africa. When they were dying in snow and in ice, in Ethiopia, in Axum, they were already building the underground edifices in Lalibela. They were building pyramids in Sudan and in Egypt. There were already libraries in Carthage. Pythagoras and all these people were already learning their philosophy from Orunmila among the Yoruba. We were there. We had a culture that was complete with science, complete with mathematics, complete with the arts. And when they say we have no art, they forget that they have stolen all of them and they are to be found in the museums in Europe. If we had no culture and if we could not do the thing they say we could not do, why were they plundering the things that they plundered? Why? Because we had a culture, and what you do is that you destroy a people's culture and then you create another culture and make them think like you want them to think. This is what they did, not only to us who remained in the mother continent, they did it even to our brothers and sisters who are taken to the Caribbean, those who are taken to the Northern America, those who went to Southern America. They did it and they took away our language. And if you doubt me, I want you to watch Alex Haley's Roots and see how the main character, Kunta Kinte, was beaten that he may abandon his name and acquire a new culture. But those who have a culture and those who believe in it will never abandon it. That is why we are remembering Omuka Makabarega, because he stood tall. Those of you who do not know will remember that incident in Ahosto where the Omukama's arm had been amputated and he kicked one of them. The time to kick them is now. The time to kick them is now, because when we kick them, then they'll realize.
Hello brothers and sisters, I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, first, before we dive into the video and do a quick reaction on it, I'll just remind you to be safe, eat healthy, do some exercise if you can, and if you do believe in religion or if you believe in God, keep on praying until something happens. Now, we have been seeing whatever has been happening, and Africa is suffering the consequences of ignorance, one, the consequences of division, and the consequences of exploitation of mineral resources. Now, the problems that are in Africa today, the problem that Africa has been facing over time, can be attributed to the ignorance of black community and the black people. Now, we the black folks have not cared that much about our countries. We've not cared about our continent. We only care when we get jobs and when we eat well and go back to sleep and when we raise our families. We do not care how much this African continent has suffered. I'm going to tell you about something that really happened in the past. And I know most of you will not agree with me, but there is a narrative that is being told. There is a story that was being told. And this story was actually talking about how some diseases made their way into Africa. You all know that we Africans didn't have some infections, or let me call them some chronic diseases. Let me say that. And back in the 1960s and 1970s, up to 1990s, late 1990s, now, vaccinations were forced into the African continent, and many African people were forced to vaccinate themselves and their children. Now, the children were being born and taken to hospital to be vaccinated. The parents were not even aware whatever their children were being vaccinated against. Now, we know there is vaccination against polio and all these other diseases, but there were those vaccinations that came in Africa, and they were meant to harm the people of Africa, to be honest. And that still continues to date, that vaccinations are being brought to our countries and you do not even know. And to your utter surprise, the government pushes this narrative so much. They're trying so much to vaccinate as a bigger population as they can. And you ask yourself, why is someone so obsessed with vaccination in Africa? Now, there was a time back in the Berlin conference and after, it is said that the Western powers met and they discussed a way to depopularize black community and mainly the Africans. Many African diaspora can attribute to this, can testify to this, that there have been actually efforts that have been made. There have been attempts that have been made to depopularize Africa and the black community, because some people wanted to offload their populations here in Africa. They wanted to take full control of Africa. Now, there is some videos I did watch some 2-3 years ago, and the video was talking about how a guy was given blood. The guy went to hospital and he was sick in a way, so the doctors told him, you need to get some transfusion because the volume of blood in your body or in your bloodstream is low. So they scheduled for a blood donation for him and all that. So the transfusion was done, and the man was good and healthy. And later on, he discovered the blood that he was given had some virus in it. So he started behaving funny, and his immune started fading away so quick that headaches could easily get him down, and all these small coughs, and he could be down. And that's not the way black people have been. And you understand, right? That's why they're pushing so many other multinational companies in Africa that support junk foods. They are pushing so many narratives. And I'm glad that when Ibrahim Traore came to power, he said no to so many multinational companies that have been brought to Africa to try and depopularize the African population, the black population. But we say, all in all, we black people should take the mandate to educate ourselves. Let's do some civic education. I'm sure you've heard stories of Ebola in Congo. You've heard of mysterious diseases in Congo. Now, there are rumors that those diseases are being made in the laboratory and taken to those countries to cause chaos, so that no one goes there. People are scared to go to Congo. You'll get Ebola and all those other infectious diseases that keep on emerging from that country. So they do this because Congo is the richest country in the world with mineral resources. It has everything. So they have kept on doing this, and the people of Congo live in absolute poverty. So, brothers and sisters, when we say this war is big, you must imagine how big this is. And if we really want to change the way the African continent has been, if we really want to change the way things will be in the motherland, we should start with ourselves. What are we doing? We can't just start by saying remove all army bases. We don't have that power ourselves. That power lies with the people we've chosen to represent us, who are the biggest puppets. So if there is need for us to talk about these things, we should start by having a very big civic education to the people in Africa. It is the first thing we can do, we as black people. So we can start by having civic education in Africa, then follow back with actions to change the regimes that are in power right now. Because 80% of the countries in Africa are being led by puppets. Just from those who are claiming to be Pan-Africanist, the person in Uganda, those are puppets. And let someone challenge me, because you can't say you are not following the Western policies, but you keep on causing mayhem in your own country. You keep on imprisoning people in your own country. What sort of democracy are you talking about? What sort of Pan-Africanism are you talking about? A Pan-Africanist cannot take his brother or sister in jail just because he said the truth. He said, stop being a dictator, stop doing this and that. This is why I appreciate Ibrahim Traore so much. He said that I'm here to receive criticism. I'm here to change. And if there is anything that the people or those in the opposition or those people who keep on an eye on the government see like we are not doing good, you're afraid to talk about it, and we will actually change how things are. So that's whatever I call Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is the act of embracing blackness, is the act of embracing Africanism in Africa, is the act of bringing black people together, the unity of black folks around the world. That's whatever we call Pan-Africanist. So we can't say Museveni of Uganda is a Pan-Africanist with the way he behaves. He has stayed in power for over 40 years. No. Even if we were to change the motherland, we must change how we ourselves think of the leaders that are in government. We have a junk full of puppets in Africa. These people do not care about this continent. You come to East Africa, no one cares about this continent. You go to the southern part of Africa, people like Julius Malema are the only one who cares about this motherland. So if we really want to change the way things have been in the motherland, we must first educate our people. We must start this at the lowest level. You who is watching this video, you have a responsibility to share this video to your friend. You have a responsibility to do this because this is whatever is going to keep Africa great. If we really want to see this continent working, if we really want to see the greatness that can be achieved when this continent becomes intact, we must start by sharing the information of unity. We must first have or conduct civic education. Civic education does not need any of your penny, by the way. You who is in the diaspora who is watching this video, you can share it. Who is watching this video and you are in Africa, you can share this information verbally with those close associates of yours. And if we continue this way and continue sharing videos of Pan-Africanism, continue sharing videos of how the motherland is making great strides towards its own liberation. I can't say Africa's been liberated. That's a lie. We've never been liberated. We were lured into believing that we've been liberated. Liberation does not mean exploitation. Liberation does not mean abduction of people when they say this is bad. Liberation does not mean staying in power for 40 years. Liberation does not mean we give our motherland to the oppressor. Liberation means standing for the motherland, standing for black unity. You all know about Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. You are because I am. So if we continue using such slogans in Africa, we are going to achieve great, because you is watching this video, you exist because your brother existed, because your mother existed, and I exist because you watch these videos, and this channel exists because you keep on coming back to watch videos, and this information will reach so many people because we exist and are in contact. Ubuntu only means that you can see your own brother suffering when you have it. Like you can't see your brother being victimized or being oppressed at your watch. So it means you'll have to say something. You'll protect them. It is the same as a mother. A mother can't see their child being brutalized by someone in absolute silence. No, they will come out and speak. This is what Ubuntu means. We must stand for the motherland. We must stand for each other. We must speak the truth. We must share the happiness that is going to come. This greatness must be achieved. And it can only be achieved by unity, by us uniting, by talking the truth, by sharing these messages to those people who are not who cannot access these messages. So this must start with us. We must advocate for this message, and we must advocate for whatever Ibrahim Traore, Julius Malema, they assassinated Patrice Lumumba because it was so easy. Africa was not united. They managed to stage a coup d'etat which ended up taking the life of Muammar Gaddafi. They ended up assassinating people like Malcolm X and all this because we were not united. But if we unite right now, we are going to be great. Babylon is going to fall only if we, the people, accept to unite and work as one. The unity of this continent, the unity of black people, the unity of black diasporians means the end to oppression, the end to police brutality, the end to all this neocolonialism and all this stuff that have been happening. So we must unite. We must talk about these things. Thank you so much for having taken your time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. If it's your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing, sharing, commenting, and liking the video. Thank you so much. Continue sharing about black unity because we are black people. We are Africa, and Africa will always be our business. Thank you so much.